79 proved this to me. I'm sure you remember the fall of many world leaders, rulers of oppression, overthrown many oppressed man. The table turning, sir,
round and round,
all them oppressor,
falling down,
the table turning, sir,
round and round.
now the oppressor
Is the oppressed one.
Round and round,
Falling down,
falling down.
round and round.
Magic 13th of 79, an incident came to mind. Bishop overthrow Gary, backed by the people's army. Well, look at Samosa, moved by the Sandinistas. Idiot in Uganda, and then Barabokasa. The table turning, sir, round and round, all them oppressor, falling down, table turning, sir.
Round and round.
Now the oppressor
Is the oppressed one.
Round and round,
Falling down,
falling down.
round and round.
The words a wheel, the Bible said, that keeps spinning every day. Today you rule a kingdom, tomorrow you in the opposite position. They shall control Iran with everything at his command. Ayatollah took his position, now they shall leave Iran and run. The table turning, sir,
Round and round.
all them oppressor.
Falling down,
The table turning, sir,
round and round.
now the oppressor
Is the oppressed one.
Round and round,
Falling down,
we're falling down.
round and round.
Round and round,
Falling down,
we're falling down.
round and round.
Table turning, sir,
Falling down,
say they're falling down.
round and round.
All them oppressor,
oppressor, falling down, table turning, sir.
Round and round.
Now the oppressor
Is the oppressed one.
round and round,
Falling down,
falling down.
round and round.
The words a wheel, the Bible said, that keeps spinning every day. Today you rule a kingdom, tomorrow you in the opposite position. They shall control Iran with everything at his command. Ayatollah took his position, now they shall leave Iran and run. The table turning, sir,
Round and round.
all them oppressor.
Falling down,
The table turning, sir,
round and round.
now the oppressor
Is the oppressed one.
Round and round,
Falling down,
we're falling down.
round and round.
Round and round,
Falling down,
we're falling down.
round and round.
Table turning, sir,
Falling down,
say they're falling down.
round and round.
All them oppressor, my side.
falling down,
We're falling down.
round and round,
Round and round.
79
falling
I
down,
said it falling
was the year of overthrow.
Keep it turning south.
We do not know what 80 might bring.
round and round,
We have seen the fall of many great leaders,
Falling down.
though they were dictators. We have seen Idi Amin, the Shah,
Falling down.
and Emperor Bokassa.
Keep it turning
We do not know who is next.
We're falling down.
So our leaders who walk the same pathway with those dictators, I say take heed, for you do not know if you are next.
falling down.
And a very good evening to you, and welcome to Politics. I know it's been quite a while since we have been on, but we are on tonight. We are on tonight. We have been out of internet in the part of Buxton that I live at the line top there. The construction people damaged the cable, and we've been calling GT&T for 2 weeks to come to fix the problem. I understand one day one worker or a set of workers came and they said they couldn't fix it because they didn't have a ladder. I have fought against going public on GT&T, but it's now been 2 weeks and 1 day. 2 weeks and 1 day, no internet. We've been calling every day the GT&T to come. As I said, some workers came one day and they said they couldn't get the problem fixed because they didn't have a ladder to climb up on the post, and they haven't come back since. We are going to be required to pay our bill as usual for the month, but for 2 weeks and 1 day, no internet in that part of Buxton. And this is the Guyana that we live in. I don't want GT&T to say that Politics 101 and David Hines, give them a bad name, but I've been waiting patiently. We have been waiting patiently at the line top, and nothing has been done. So we have to come public with that issue, and that's the kind of Guyana that we live in. The government sets the pace by being negligent, and then the private sector, for the most part, the same thing. You go to places in Guyana, and you're being treated as though you have no worth, both in the private sector and the public sector. I went to a government office recently, and the young lady looking after me sat there. I stood in front of her for 10 minutes. She never raised her head, acknowledged my presence. She never acknowledged my presence. And a young man was sitting next door, and they're chatting away. And I'm standing there, and she's on the computer. She never raised her head, acknowledged my presence. And after 10 minutes, she shoved some things in front of me and said, sign this, sign that, and so on. And then I drew to her attention that she hasn't acknowledged my presence, and that instead of talking to me, who's a customer, she's talking to a young man. I think the gentleman who was standing by knew who I was, and he felt very uncomfortable. I then told her who I was. And then she said, well, the reason it took 10 minutes was because the system was slow. I said, I'm not talking about the system. I am drawing to your attention that you are working in the government service, and that, I am standing here and you never looked up at me. You're talking to a young man, first of all. What is the young man doing sitting there? Is he a worker? Is he a trainee? What it is? And, and I am not naming the agency because, as I said, look, this is a young person who has a job is not earning much, and I don't want to get her in trouble, because if she loses that job, I'm not in a position to give her another job. But I am just drawing to your attention that there is a sickness in our country. It's a sickness in our country where nobody seems to care. And it's okay for me to be mad at that young lady, but clearly she's working in an environment where there's no penalty for that kind of behavior. It happens from the top, come right down. As I said, I am not publicizing what agency it was, because I don't want to get the young lady in trouble, because I am very sure she's not working for a considerable amount of wages, and usually the people at the bottom are the ones who are make the scapegoat for a culture. But I was very, very disappointed, as I am with GT&T, that after 2 weeks they cannot fix whatever's gone wrong with the internet. We know that the cable was messed up by the people who were working on the road there. And as I said, the neighbors told me that GT&T people came one day, and the guy said that he couldn't fix the problem because he didn't have a ladder. How you're coming to deal with a problem? You're told what the problem is, you don't walk with a ladder. Well, you didn't have a ladder a week ago, and since then you haven't returned with a ladder. And so we are there without any internet, without any service. Almost daily there are calls from persons in the neighborhood there. I desisted from calling because I would go on bad if I call, and I didn't want to do that. Second, I didn't want to have to pull ranks for a company to do what it is supposed to do every day. You're collecting people's monies and their problems, and nobody seems to care. Nobody seems to care. And that's the Guyana that we live in. That's the Guyana that we live in. And like I said, it starts at the top. It starts at the top. It filters down to the bottom. It happens in government offices. It happens in the public sector. It happens in the private sector. And as I said, I don't think the problem is the workers. The problem is the work culture, the customer care. I have, like so many of us Guyanese, traveled through the Caribbean, and I am not saying those places are perfect, but there's a sense of customer care. As I said, I stood in front of that young lady for 10 minutes. She never looked up. She never said hello. You're here, give me a couple of minutes. The system is slow. Never, never, never. And when she finished, she shoved something in front of me. Sign this thing. And it's in a government office. Right? Now, if I were to identify the office, then they would trace, and they would find that child, and I'm sure she would be reprimanded. When she is not the problem is the culture, the customer culture, the lack of respect for people. When I identified who I was, she was very repentant. You know, she said, well, sorry, sir, the system was slow, and she sought to give an excuse and so on. But clearly because I identified who I was. So the point is, can you imagine what ordinary people go through every single day? And that is why sometimes I am leery of identifying myself if I'm not identified, because you get a chance to observe what goes on in these places. And it is for that reason that I have not called GT&T yet. The neighbors have been calling every day, different neighbors every day, and they have not come to fix that problem. After 2 weeks and a day. Good evening to you. Please share the live. That is the reason that we have not been on for the last 2 weeks. Please share the live and let everyone know that we are on tonight. The table is turning. The calypso that started us off tonight, the Mighty Explainer, talking about the fall of governments in 1979. Some of us lived through that time, the Age of Revolution, 1979, the Grenada Revolution, the overthrow of Gary, the Nicaraguan Revolution, overthrow of Somoza, the Iranian Revolution, the overthrow of the Shah of Iran. We had Bokassa in Africa. We had Idi Amin in Uganda. It was the age of overthrow. We had in February of 1980, the Suriname Revolution led by Daisy Bouterse, the overthrowing of Ankaran. We had the overthrow of Patrick John in Dominica by popular insurrection on the streets. There was the Union Island eruption, where led by the Rastafarians, the people of the Union Island, one of the Grenadines Island, December 1979, they attempted to secede from St. Vincent, almost succeeded. The Tom Adams of Barbados sent troops in, because as you know, St. Vincent didn't have an army, and Tom Adams sent troops in to quell that rebellion. That's why Gabi sang that calypso, Boots and More Boots, to quell a non-existent rebellion. He was talking about that. I lived through that time. So many of us lived through that period. And I've met a couple of people younger people, who learned of that period and said, where have all the soldiers gone? Where have all the revolutionaries gone? Because we have governments today behaving as though they're invincible, because the will to stand up has gone. Well, we are human beings, and human beings can take so much. Our government in Guyana is doing whatever it feels. It is doing so because the people seem to have lost the will to fight. It is doing so because the big powers like the United States are standing behind them. It is within the interests of the United States and the big countries to stand behind the status quo, given the wealth that we have here. What they are protecting is the status quo. The PPP happens to be the government. We are the American ambassadors throwing the weight of the United States behind the PPP. And some people correctly are saying, have we become a colony again? Have we become a colony again where the United States determines what happens? And I think that is a very fair question. But for me, the larger question is that the government of this country, in a cynical way, is taking advantage of world politics, the dynamics of world politics, and they're taking advantage of the situation with the people in Guyana. half of the population, the Indo-Guyanese, have decided that they're not going to fight injustice because from an ethnic standpoint, it's their government. And as some have told me, it is better to deal with our devil than someone else's devil. That's a fair comment in the circumstances. And Amerindians and Africans who find themselves in an impoverished state and have become very transactional. So in a sense, all our people have become transactional. Indian Guyanese have become transactional in a sense that they are getting a little bit more of what is falling off, the crumbs that are falling off from the table. And that from an ethnic standpoint, the government looks like them, and so they are not rocking the boat. And in a sense, that is transactional. And then we have African Guyanese, who have become perhaps the most transactional people, much to the frustration of many of us. And then Amerindians. So you have the foreign governments, the European governments, the American governments, some of the CARICOM governments deal with Guyana in a transactional way. Gone are the days when people are concerned about human rights and all of those things. Gone are the days when foreign policy is based on human rights. It's transactional. So you have international politics and regional politics dealing with Guyana from a transactional standpoint. And then the citizens of Guyana have become transactional over a period of time. It took a little while for me to wrap my entire mind around what has gone wrong with poor people in general and African Guyanese. You remember a year ago, 2 years ago, the PPP was very confident, very confident. Nobody listens to David Hinds and them. African Guyanese have changed. And I knew from my study of politics that is not true. That African Guyanese were not going to go and vote for the PPP just like that. What I didn't know was how much the PPP has spent, how much money it has spent over time, studying the psyche of African people and Amerindian people. And so they had a sense of how transactional these two communities had become. And people like myself did not have that sense. I knew, my colleagues used to say, take the money and you know where you're going to vote. I never liked that. I never used it. But I don't think we understood the extent to which the PPP worked for 3 decades on our Amerindian community and the African community, especially the younger communities. And they knew that they were ripe for a certain kind of transactional politics. And so what we have is transaction that is dominating our politics. And people try to explain our politics in classical terms, meaning, they try to use old traditional methods of analysis to explain what is happening in our country. And they do not recognize that those methods and modes of analysis do not explain the totality of what's happening in our country. It partly explains. But if you don't factor the transactional culture in the country, then you miss totally what has happened. I was intimately involved with the campaign, the electoral campaign of the APNU at this last election. And I knew it was one of the better campaigns from internal standpoint. We did what could be done. And yet the results were shocking. And then people, after the results came in, people then say, you all never connected with the masses. You all never this, you all never that. And what they do not factor in is that people from your camp who are leaving you every day and are blooding you as they leave. Sometimes they don't have to say anything. They just leaving every day. Every day somebody's leaving. It bloodies the party and the coalition. And it gives people an excuse to then vote in non-traditional ways. So, you know, it's like murdering somebody and then say to that person, you commit suicide. If you start off by saying Norton is unelectable and you open that floodgate, because it was a floodgate. Once you say he's not electable, then all kinds of things came in. He's too dark, he drinking at Bam Bam Ali, he too black, he don't smile, he this. Once you, as an influential leader, say he is not electable, then you open the door for all kinds of characterization. And after doing that for a year, it becomes part of the people's electoral psyche. And then you say to him, well, you should have, well, no. He did what every political leader has done. But you kill him. And then you come now and say, he commits suicide. And so therefore, unless you factor in those things, you're never going to understand what is happening politically in our country. Good evening to you all. Welcome to Politics 101. Please share the live. It's been a difficult few weeks for me, for our community. A couple of close friends have gone to the great beyond. And a great fan of this program. Great fan of this program from the beginning. Danette Booker from Buxton. Very close personal friend. She was APNU. Well, in Buxton, you know, there is, you know, say the WPA APNU thing. But she was APNU. At the 2020 election, you know, every single rally, it doesn't matter where it is, Danette would find a way to get there. Didn't go on the platform and make speeches. But she felt that our physical presence meant a lot. She knew it meant a lot. Very, very dedicated soldier. She died this past week. Still a relatively young woman. She comes from a family in the village that is backbone, an entrepreneurial family. People who were entrepreneurs in the village. She comes from that, and she comes from that environment. Her sister Denise Booker lives on these programs. Denise is from the morning on Kedaki right through to this program, right through to all the program. And Danette would be on this program even when she was sick. She would still be on here in the evening. Danette, you could call Danette. Danette, we out here drinking. We want something to eat. Cook a pot to cook up. Next 2 hours, the cook up is there. Danette, all year's night. We gotta get Pat to cook up. Danette, on time. And always there. I will miss her. And, it is coming home to us that we're moving on. And then Sister Bridget Goodman, a PNC, APNU stalwart in the village, passed away this week. Bridget was sick for the last year. And on election day last year, even though she was sick, her hand was in a sling, she still came out on election day and worked as a polling agent. She still came out and worked, as sick as she was. That was the kind of person that she was. Dedicated. We didn't know how sick she was last September, but she clearly was ill, and she came out and worked and fought, because she wasn't just one who went into a polling station and sat down. She was a fighter. She also comes from a foundation family in the village, the Goodmans. In fact, Danette and Bridget, they live opposite each other at company. Bridget follows her sister, who we buried about a month ago. Her brother, who we buried last year, and a couple of other family members. It's one of those times for that family. I tell those stories because often people see us, the leaders, and they recognize us, they acknowledge us, they, whatever accolades, if there's some, they give us those accolades. But often they don't know that there are persons in the community, a phalanx of people, some of them visible, some not so visible, who are there and whose presence and quiet work make it possible for us to lead. Danette and Bridget were two such people. We know that death comes as it must come, and that our people must go home. It's called home. But it's difficult, and sometimes it becomes difficult when almost every day, I think in my village there are seven, as they say, 7 dead waiting to be buried. Rest in peace to all of them. And it's difficult when you know these people personally, as I know Danette. You know, every single rally, I remember in 2020, she and her friend Hazel from Brush Dam, she would be there. Borbees, Georgetown, Linden. Those are the people. Those are the people who make the revolution. Those are the people who make the revolution. I was telling the PNC people the other night that one of their stalwarts in the village died. I called her name. They didn't know her name. Understandably so, because there are people who do not necessarily look for recognition. And Bridget was such a person. She did her work in the village. Raynor's son, she did her work in the village. Her favorite time was election time. That's when you would see her in her glory, working. All good, my sisters. All good. On Sunday, we joined the people of Haslington and neighboring villages to bury the young man who died in police custody. And a member of the government said that the police was not responsible for his death. We went there on Sunday. Thousands of young people. The older people were there, but for obvious reason, I'm emphasizing the young people. Thousands of people. The entire community and beyond, younger people came out as they do. So it was not just a funeral, almost in an act of defiance. Dr. Dexter Todd and Ronald Daniels, Attorney Daniels, and myself represented the APNU. Dr. Todd and Ronald Daniels, they are handling the legal aspect because we are pursuing with the family legal relief. Because you're not going to tell us that a man dies in police custody and nobody is responsible. Dr. Todd spoke, Mr. Daniel spoke, and I spoke. And as some of the younger people told me later on, said, Dr. Hines, for the first time, somebody sung more revolutionary than you. Dr. Todd delivered a fighting message. Fighting message. And the young people paid attention. They paid attention. Dr. Todd reminded that when we were there 3 years before, at the Quindon Bacchus funeral at the same church, that I had spoken before him, and this time he was speaking before me, fittingly so. He's of another generation. And I think people of my generation have a responsibility to know when to step back and to allow representatives of the new generation to voice the energies, the vibes that come from our people. There were young people there. I don't know if they all voted for APNU, but they were all there and we spoke. I understand representatives of the Win Party were there, but they were not visible. They didn't speak, but we spoke. And I know I don't have to tell you all what happened afterwards. The young people took the body and took it to the police station. I think they laid the casket on the road and took it to the police station. There's a story, you know. The incident that prompted the Selma to Montgomery March in 1965 was when a young man was killed by the police. A young black man was killed by the police in Montgomery. And at his funeral, the young people wanted to take his body and take it to the police station. Apparently they were talked out of it. That incident sparked the Selma to Montgomery conflict that led to the famous Selma to Montgomery March. I tell that story to say that what the young people did in Haslington, Golden Grove, Nabaklis, on Sunday was the fulfilling of 61 years. I am almost certain that those young people did not know of the incident in 1965 in Montgomery. So you can't say they were copying what somebody did. Their instincts took them that way. Dr. Todd's message was resounding. We in the Black community have to stop this killing of our young people. We in the Black community have to do it. And he made it very, very clear. I spoke afterwards and continued on that theme, that we have got to stop this nonsense in this country. We have got to stop it. We didn't have to tell the people, go take the Kaufman, carry to the police station. We didn't think about that. But those young people heard that message. And I'm not saying it was the message that drove them to take that action. I mean, no, because I don't know that. But I'm saying that in the presence of the message of fight, those young people did something that was very revolutionary. They showed that they are symbolic ways of responding to tyranny. I was so proud of those people, so proud of them, so proud of them. And when we talk about fight, that is what we're talking about. There are times when we will have to get dreaded and dread. But there are times when that dreadness manifests itself in very creative ways. Very creative ways. And that is why that young man must not die in vain, Otis Jordan. I later found out that his father is from Buxton and is one of my students. I only learned that about 2 days before. And then I saw a lot of Buxtonians at the funeral. So, you know, he had part Buxton heritage. We bury our dead. But as I have always said, when we finish burying our dead, we've got to fight like hell. And I know these are the days when people tend to be politically correct. And sometimes I myself have tried to be politically correct. But I think we have gone beyond the point of political correctness. Because the more you try to be politically correct, the more the government becomes deviant. The theory of political correctness assumes that if you act correctly, the government will act correctly. But the government reads political correctness as weakness and acts in more brazen ways. And so political correctness as a form of political struggle in Guyana, I think, has run its course. And we have got to become dreader than dread. The killing of African young men is not accidental. It has a long historical life. It arises out of the way in which our politics have developed. And it's becoming more pronounced because Black people are in a very bad state. I'm not saying all is gone in the Black community. I can't be saying that. But I think it justifies why people like myself have become very pronounced in our defense and protection of the Black community. The Black community has been worked on, the psyche of almost 2 to 3 generations of people has been damaged. People have always been transactional. It's part of the human instinct to be transactional. But African people have become so transactional that it hinders the ability to say no. It hinders the ability to stand for justice. And so it is easy for a young man to die in police custody and for the government official to say the police is not responsible. And if that can happen, and those in power say that the police is not responsible, then the police is going to go out tomorrow and do the same thing because they guarantee that the government is going to shelter them. We are ready to say that the Black community is in terrible shape. Terrible shape. And in a Guyana, where the stakes are so high, it is the worst time to be in terrible shape. It's not the first time the Black community has been in terrible shape. There were times when the Indian community was in terrible shape. There are times when the Amerindian community, perhaps more than the other 2 communities, has been in terrible shape. But this is the worst time for Black people to be in terrible shape. The tremendous wealth that is coming into this country and is being distributed in this country. And because Black people are in terrible shape, they're not able to benefit equitably from that wealth. And the wealth of today is going to determine control of Guyana tomorrow. And the fact that Black people are not in a state to demand their share of the macro wealth of the country, it means that tomorrow their citizenship is going to worth less than the citizenship of other groups who have the presence of mind to understand what is happening in the country today. I think as a collective, Black people do not have a real understanding of what is taking place before their very eyes. I can guarantee you that no Indian community is going to be without internet for 2 weeks. GT&T would not try that in an Indian community. They wouldn't. I guarantee you they will not try it because they know there will be consequences if they try it. But they can leave part of a community in Buxton without internet for 2 weeks, knowing very well that there are not going to be any consequences for it. If there were consequences, they would be there in a day. And so what is happening? I suspect it's happening in the Amerindian community. But I always say, I don't push my mouth where it shouldn't be. I think they have enough Amerindian leaders who are fighting like hell for the Amerindian communities. But the African community, where I'm from, I take the liberty to speak about that community and to that community. And I'm saying we are compromising our standing in this country. We are compromising our citizenship. We are compromising our future. And Black parents have to find a way to speak to their children, those of us who can still speak to them. Because I understand fully well that it's very difficult these days for parents to talk to their children. It's very difficult. But those who still can speak to their children, I think you all have to speak to them. You all have to try. The Black community is in terrible shape. Every day it is compromising its standing. It is being very transactional as far as its justice is concerned. Professor Clive Thomas 50 years ago coined the term bread and justice, effectively saying that bread is important, but you cannot trade your justice for a piece of bread. Martin Carter said the mouth is muzzled by the food it eats, and in a sense saying that the mouth ought not to be muzzled by the food it eats. The African mouth, for the most part, is muzzled by the food it eats. The little food. You hear them saying in the Black community, man can eat a food. Meaning, one exchanges one's human right for a little piece of bread. Even the Bible, man shall not live by bread alone. So Thomas and Carter fall in the line of the Bible. Man shall not live by bread alone. So like I said, this is a terrible time for the Black community to be in trouble. Because so much is happening in Guyana. A lot of it bad. But a lot of it has to do with what Guyana will become in the next 20 years. There's a $5 million contract that they shared out during the election time to young Africans. A lot of it is gone by now. In most cases, it's gone. And no more $5 million contract coming. The WPA called for $1 million. $1 million. Because we feel that if you take a section, a part of our oil takings, 10%, and you divide it, that people can get, meaning every household, not individual, every household can get $1 million, close to $1 million. Our people didn't take that seriously when they went to the polls. So we end up now with 100,000. And understandably, people won the 100,000. But the requirements, they're asking people to register, they're asking you for your bank account. And understandably, a lot of people are saying they don't want to give the bank account because they feel that the government is going to thief their money, go into their account. It just shows you the state of our country. You know, anybody who knows about banks knows that your money is probably more secure in the bank than it is under your bed these days. But don't tell that to the ordinary people. They've developed a cynicism about this country. And so they feel that they can't trust the government with their bank account. And so it's hell to get people registered, and then don't talk about the difficulty in poor people setting up a bank account. But the larger point I'm making is that we didn't think about cash transfer in its more profound way, that something has to be by law. It will be more. This thing about individual is leaving out people rather than including people. But we've become so selfish that the mother and the father is not thinking about their children. The two teenage children who may have families of their own, they're not 18. And they're left out of this 100,000. Mommy is going to get our 100,000. But it's 17-year-old daughter, 17-year-old son with children, they ain't getting nothing. So one household getting 1,000. Whereas if we had done it by households, and you'd said 100,000 per household, that house, that family would get 300,000 instead of 100,000. So the PPP government has damaged the psyche of this country. They've damaged the psyche of this country, and it's affecting Amerindian people and black people most because they are more vulnerable. That we are not thinking beyond the individualistic instinct. And so we are being taken for a ride. We are being taken for granted. We are being taken advantage of. Our vote is, they're forcing us to compromise our vote. Young lady told me at the back of Buxton, said, who you supporting? Me support all parties. Now, if you're telling me, if I ask you which party you support, and you tell me you're supporting all parties, you're telling me plain to my face, you're not supporting my party. Young lady didn't understand, but it shows you how transactional our people. And this is a young lady that came to ask us to help her get the cash grant. But say, when you ask who you support, I support all. You're coming and asking me to help you to get a cash grant. We in the black community have to recognize the risk that we are taking at this juncture. We are going to regret it 5 years from now, but by then the damage would have already been done and we would be further behind. We are already behind. But given some choices we are making now, given the bad state that we are in 10 years, in 20 years, we are going to be 3 times further behind. Are we prepared to live with that? Are we prepared to live with that? Brother told me, Dr. Hines, I like when the Indians empower, man. The money just run. I can get my run-ins. What do you say to a brother like that? The PPP put you on run-ins, and so your life now is on run-ins. And the logic of everything you do is dictated by run-ins. Ask a young brother about how do you see the future of Guyana? So, well, we in the future, man. We got to fight for ourselves. Black people haven't get no future in this country. So we got to fight for ourselves. That is what you have to deal with. All is not lost. All is not lost. We've got to continue to do this work. We've got to work at the level of the family. We've got to work at the level of the community. We've got to understand what is happening. You press on, because I think logical Indian Guyanese understand the danger of the course that the PPP has taken. I think the PPP understand where this could take us as a country. But they're political gamblers. And they're gambling that if you delay the inevitable long enough, you get to fulfill your plan. And so by the time the inevitable happens, you would have already fulfilled your plan of accumulation of wealth in the hands of one section of the society. You would have economic control of the country. That is the PPP plan. It's not that the PPP doesn't know that the inevitable will happen. You notice all the young people had to do was to carry the casket and put it on in front of the police station, and you see how the riot squad and all the squad, they jump out and they're ready. The PPP is not saying we have to think about what has driven these young people to do what they did there on Sunday. They're going to say, oh, it's David Hines and Dexter Todd. Tell them to do it. They're not going to take an approach where they sit down and dialogue with the black community. They're going to confront them with guns. And if you keep confronting people with guns every day, eventually something is going to give. And the PPPs thinking that when that time comes, the leaders in the police force who are PPP people will give the orders to kill, and they will kill. Or they're thinking that even if they have to come then and to sit down and talk, they would have already fulfilled their grand plan. You notice they send Vanessa, Ben, and Stephen Jacobs to Geneva at the International Forum of African People to speak on behalf of African people. And they're there speaking on behalf of the PPP government rather than on behalf of African people. I'm going to deal with that in a subsequent program. But I'm not being alarmist. Black people are in trouble. And the only people who can take us out of trouble is us. The PPP like when we're in trouble. Good evening to all of you. Those of you who have joined us late. We have a program tonight. We have not been having program for the past 2 weeks because I've been out of internet for 2 weeks. The construction workers, they've messed up the cable that they lined up there. GT&T was called. They showed up a week later, some workers, and they said they couldn't fix the problem because they didn't walk with a ladder. Those of you who, please call GT&T and tell them what they're doing. I have refrained from calling them because if I call them, it wouldn't be nice. we are going to be charged the usual monthly bill. Sad country that we are living in. But the table's got to turn. And I see my job to help to turn those tables. Ultimately, the tables have to be turned by the people, by the choices we make. Thanks to all those of you who have been in Georgetown a few times recently, who have stopped me to talk, the people on the East Coast. We had a good street parliament in East Ramville the other night, Friday night. Some residents came out, and it was good to have a chat, to field some questions from them. The next street parliament is built for Haslington, ground zero for extrajudicial killing. 2 young men in 3 years. Stay tuned for the date. It's likely to be sometime this weekend. I think there was some shift in the date, so I don't want to confuse, but our next street parliament is going to be in Haslington. The irony is that while I was there at the funeral on Sunday, people ask for us to go there with the street parliament. So things are not as terrible, but they're terrible. They're not as terrible as some of you may think, but they're still terrible. But there's hope. And we're going to continue to do the work to rescue our community and ultimately rescue Guyana from the situation it's in. Our condolences, as I said, to the family, the Goodman family in Buxton and the Booker family, the loss of 2 stalwarts. And like I said, Danette was a foundation member of Politics 101, owner of Politics 101. The struggle goes on. Hopefully we'll make it out. We'll make it through this week with programs. So I will see you all tomorrow evening.